Hi, it's Ursula from ursula-smith.com, and today I was trying to solve a dilemma. When I was using a stamp, I stamped in Distress Oxide Ink, not necessarily in this color, but Distress Oxide Ink, and I wanted to come back over it with Distress Oxide and regular spray stains, but I didn't want that color to oxidize that much. So trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this? So I'll show you at the end of the video what I ultimately decided was my best course of action. But there were multiple things I tried, and so I'll just kind of explain them and show you what happened. So in the case of a stamp designed by me, I could use a mask cut by me in the same dimensions, but I understand most people don't work that way. So I mentioned that in case you are like me, where you have a digital cutter, you design your own cutouts and your own stamps, then awesome, you are good to go, just use a mask. But in one of the first cases, this was made from a foam stamp, and I have a video where I show you how to do this or make this foam stamp. But I don't have a mask for A, this is not my design, and B, that would, I mean, I could theoretically cut the design, but it would be a lot of work, and no. So for this one, what I ultimately ended up doing was I used Distress Glaze over the parts I wanted to protect, and I just used a paintbrush and painted it on. So that is definitely a possibility when the design is simple and you can basically color. You can use that technique. And then I came back over it with just regular Distress Oxide sprays and a little bit of regular spray stain, and you can see this is where I glazed it, so it's protected it. This was where I didn't. So same part, same Distress Oxide ink stamped, but this oxidized, this didn't. So for simple shapes, that is definitely a possibility. Ooh. Yeah, just use Distress Glaze to paint on. So the next thing that I tried with the stamp that I was trying to protect, so in this case I was using, what is it, Squeezed Lemonade Distress Oxide, and it's a pretty yellow color. I didn't want it to go some wonky color, and I didn't want it to be hidden, so the next thing I tried was Vaseline, stamping with Vaseline. Actually, I did try stamping with Distress Glaze, but it dries really fast, and I didn't have good luck with that. So then I tried Vaseline, which is a little bit thicker. It sort of resisted. In this case, I tried it again with a different stamp. This is that bubble stamp, and wasn't quite as successful. So that one is kind of a maybe. If you want to try it and you're better at stamping with Vaseline than I am, then go for it. So then the next thing I did was I stamped with drawing gum. So this is a product that you use in watercolor to protect anything that you've already watercolored when you bring more watercolor or more water back over the top. So the first time I did it, I actually used a different product. It was a little bit thinner. I think it was by Schminky, and it was very, very liquid, and it kind of worked. And what I did was I just stamped with the drawing gum, let it dry as much, till I felt like, okay, it's pretty much almost to the point of being able to rub it off, and then sprayed over the top, and then let that whole thing dry. Because if you go in too quickly with especially I was doing this on craft, and so these colors were amazing. So the color combination on craft was really cool. It was Worn Lipstick, Distress Oxide spray, and then walnut stain, regular spray stain, which gave that blue or blue-gray. So I thought that was a really cool combination on the craft cardstock. And then I came back over those light whitish, pinkish is spun sugar and Distress Oxide spray. And so that kind of worked. Then I tried it with the Pebeo drawing gum, and I did this stamping with this like eons ago. This is the same jar, believe it or not. It's a little thicker, probably on its way out, but it still worked. You will notice I probably didn't wait long enough, and so some of the sprays over the top of the drawing gum kind of probably snuck under, and then when I went to rub it off, it left this staining, which kind of looks cool. So in theory, this worked, and all I did was I used the applicator tool, which I put my foam with the domed foam, put a little puddle on my silicone mat, tapped it in, and then tapped it on the stamp, on my stamp positioner. I did do it several times. So again, if you have a stamp positioner and you have this product, you know, something like this product, you can give it a shot. But ultimately, what worked the best for me was I stamped it in the squeezed lemonade, and then again with the stamp positioner, I stamped back over it with an embossing ink. And then I embossed it with embossing powder. So in this case, it was Distress Embossing Glaze in fossilized amber. You can see I forgot the step about the embossing ink, and so I had to go back in and put my paper back, and I misaligned by a hair, but I actually like that look. So that darker area is the embossing ink, kind of offset a little bit. And so then I will tell you, I tried, nope, that's the wrong thing. I tried to run it through my laminator because I was like, oh, that provides heat. I did put paper on the top of it and the paper on top of it because I didn't want the embossing powder to contaminate my rollers. Put paper on top of it. The paper stuck to the embossing powder as it was melting, and then when I went to pull it off, it pulled the whole thing off. So that did not work. But undeterred, I tried it once again and tried to peel off as soon as it came out of the rollers. And it worked a little bit better, but in my mind, still probably not the way to go. So this one, you could leave it embossed if you like, but I wanted it, you can see, it's not embossed. It's flat, it's matte. I could sand it and take some of the shine away. But I really I wanted it flat. And so I will show you how I did this in the next clip. Thanks for joining me, and here comes the project. Okay, so here's where I am at. I have stamped my stamp using Distress Oxide and Squeezed Lemon. And I had to do it a couple of times because I'm stamping on craft, and that's a little bit more difficult. So again, using my stamp positioner to do that. And then I came back over it with Versamark ink. I did that for a couple of times, and now I've covered it in embossing powder, the embossing glaze in fossilized amber. And this could be just about any color, because we're going to remove it, but it does leave some color behind, so I went with a color that was kind of in the same palette as the ink. So I'm going to go off and emboss this, and when it's done, I will be back. Okay, I'm back, and I've embossed. You can see it's all super shiny. And so actually just plain, I love that color combination, the squeezed lemon with the fossilized amber. So you could just leave it, but I, of course, want to add some more color. So again, you've seen me do this a million times. I'm using Distress Oxide sprays in worn lipstick and sponge sugar, and then regular spray stain in walnut stain. And so you're just going to go right over the top of everything. And again, this was what I was trying to do with some of those other mediums, like the Vaseline and the watercolor gum. Then maybe a couple of spritz, maybe a little bit more of this. I kind of like the speckly look with this, especially with this color combination. Probably added a little too much spray stain, and then a little bit of the sponge sugar. And you can add more flecks later if you like. So now, of course, always the hard part, we have to go off and let it dry. And when it is, I will be back. Okay, I am back, and so I dried the ink, the spray stains, rather than letting it air dry, just so that I can continue. And so now comes the part where we're going to remove the embossing powder. And so what I do is I use an iron. And so I do it on the highest, so linen, no steam, and this is a dedicated iron. Do not use the one you use for your clothes, or you'll be very unhappy. So generally the way that I do this is I actually use another piece of cardstock, because you'll get the transferred image, which then will somewhat resist as well. So in this case, this is an example of that. I didn't have the iron set high enough. I didn't wait long enough, and so I had to do it a couple of times, so that's why the image looks wonky. But you can see that it works, and that it then resisted the ink that I sprayed on top. But what I want to try today is, the way that I was actually taught was to use newsprint. It's a very thin paper, and I usually get it for free because a lot of stuff comes wrapped in it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that, because I did a YouTube video like eons ago how when you have embossing powder on top of newsprint, it goes translucent. And so I want to see, doing this technique, if that same, I did embossing straight onto newsprint, I want to see if this lift off will effectively do the same thing. So you're just going to take your iron, and this has been heating up for a few minutes, and you're just going to run across the top. And with the newsprint, it's much easier to tell that it's working, because it comes through the back. It's such a thin paper that you can actually see that the embossing powder has started to basically remelt into that paper. And so in this case, you can see that I'm missing part of the image, and there's probably some kind of bump or something down there that I'm not getting good contact. So you would just go around until the entire thing has been lifted. It looks like it's lifted. It just didn't come through the back, so there must not have been a lot. And then don't forget to turn off and unplug your iron. And so now you can see, oh no, see, I did miss a spot. So I could go back in with the iron and just pick up those last vestiges of the embossing. But the rest of it is flat, and you get that Distress Oxide look stamped without any oxidation. So anyway, thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you next time. And I had a total brain cramp. I just realized this was not going to show through. It was not going to be transparent because, duh, it had color in it. So it's not a clear. So if you want to try this, you would have to try it with clear. And then you can see a little bit, but it's got to be dark and pretty much of a contrast. So like layering it over text would be kind of cool. So that's what I was trying to test. So it looks like it will work. If you really want it to be translucent, you should use the clear. But I liked the look of the little bit of color that the embossing glaze gave to the ink. So I will probably stick with that technique. So thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Okay, so just a couple more tips. So when I did the lift off with the iron with the cardstock, I was using just, junky office supply cardstock. But this time I used Nina Bright White, and it didn't smear nearly as much. And so I get the reverse or the inverse image of the embossing powder. And then I can go and try and do the sprays over that and hopefully get a resist on that. Then I did want to point out, this was the specialty stamping. And the color combination didn't come out as cool as it did on the craft. So the color combination, worn lipstick, spun sugar, and then walnut stain looks way better on the craft paper. But you can see, I also had a little bit of trouble, well, maybe you can't see. There's still a little bit of that shininess from the embossing powder left, so I had a little bit of trouble lifting off. I even went in with the newsprint to try and lift off the last vestiges, and still there is a little bit of shine. It's not showing up on camera, but there is a little bit of shine left. So this specialty stamping paper, it stamps great, but oh, there you can kind of see it. But for this technique, you probably want to stick with one of the uncoated. And then I tried just the Versamark with the embossing powder or embossing glaze. Same thing in fossilized amber, just to see if it would add a color. But nope. So you do need that dioxide color. If you want that color to show up, you do need that underneath. But this is still a cool looking, just having the craft cardstock show through. So once again, thanks for joining me. See you next time.